Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. Tonight, we're going to be doing something a little bit differently, and that is to go over a movie, a UFO-related movie that was released recently by one Brian Dunning, who is the creator and podcast host for Skeptoid. And a lot of true believers, you might say, are very upset over this film and this movie. And I myself had not seen it up until yesterday. But upon viewing it, I now have a complete and thorough understanding of why so many true believers are losing their goddamn minds. This movie, I was about to say, I believe that this documentary is the best UFO documentary in a decade. However, something being the best is really a subjective thing. So I won't call it the best UFO documentary in the past decade, but I will say that I believe that this is the most needed and most important UFO documentary that I have seen in at least 10 years. And the reason for that is quite simply, we never anymore get the other side of the story. When we had Bob Kiviat, who was the producer of the Alien Autopsy Fox News special and Unsolved Mysteries producer and more, he and I talked in some detail about how the way that documentaries and television shows used to be made is that they would give you both sides of the story. In other words, they would have sort of the true believer side, like it might be aliens, but then they'd bring in someone a little more scientifically minded, a little more skeptical to sort of poke holes in why it's probably not aliens. But in recent years, especially since 2016, I would say, there has been a marked change in the way that UFO stories and alien stories are presented. And completely and totally gone is the skeptical side of things. It's like that just got erased, and nobody does that anymore. Now, I'm sure I'm generalizing, but I do watch every UFO documentary made, so I've seen all of them made since 2016. And by the way, Mr. Kiviat, who is a legendary television producer, worked on Unsolved Mysteries and, of course, the Alien Autopsy television special, which is perhaps the most viewed television special about aliens or UFOs ever in history to this day, I think. He and I agreed on that point. And in fact, he was the one who brought it to my attention. He would tell me, like, Stephen, we used to tell both sides of the story. They stopped doing that. They don't tell both sides of the story any longer. So what happens is we get really terrible, I believe we get really terrible forms of evidence. And Mr. Dunning expertly comments on that anecdotes aren't really evidence, and the piss poor quality of the so-called evidence that people put forth in these television shows. And again, the name of the movie that we're discussing tonight, and we will be discussing in some detail, is called The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See. It is by Brian Dunning of Skeptoid. So, and by the way, in the link in the description of this video, or if you're listening in audio podcast land, the podcast, there is a link to where you too can watch this important UFO documentary for free. Now, it's ad supported, but you can watch it for free now. You don't even have to buy it. And I highly recommend this. I can't say enough good things. We're going to go through, I made some notes. I watched it twice, once just to watch it, and then the second time to make notes. So we'll be going through it in detail. I'll be sharing some clips from the film as well. But before we do that, maybe I should play you. There's a trailer for this. I'm sorry, I wasn't planning on playing the trailer. It just occurred to me I should have began the broadcast with it. One second, I'll get that. I'm sure he had a trailer on his channel. So, yeah, there is a trailer. All right, we're going to play the trailer so you can get some idea of what this film is like. And then we'll begin discussing, and I'll share some specific clips from the film. I want to congratulate Mr. Dunning on an excellent job. And, you know, the marketing of the movie I thought was pretty interesting too, because he called it the UFO movie they don't want you to see, which is a bit ambiguous because who's they? Does that mean the government doesn't want us to see this? No. I think it's a brilliant stroke of luck that he came across this title, because it really appears, you know, I think that people aren't going to quite know what to expect going into the movie if you're not familiar with Mr. Dunning and his very skeptical view on many things. But who they is, I believe, and I've heard him on another podcast speaking about this, he's referring to the people that make these garbage television shows and documentaries. These people that we commonly call the Grift Squad, the UFO Grift Squad, the Scam Squad, whatever you want to call them. This is a movie that rips people who profit from UFO stories to shreds, because they're all guilty of some of the things that Mr. Dunning talks about in this excellent film. But let's begin just by reviewing the trailer. This is one of the trailers to the film.
UFOs are everywhere in the media. UFOs get you to turn on the TV. UFOs get you to share articles and social media posts. Lots of people want you to be excited about what might be in our skies. TV producers don't want you to take them lightly.
And it looks like we're seeing some kind of flying green triangle.
Congress doesn't want you to feel safe.
One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead.
Even the military wants you in the dark.
I know of no nation that has ever tested an aircraft that is radically beyond any aviation capability we've ever heard of.
A lot of people's jobs are easier when you don't understand the science behind today's UFO phenomenon. But you can. Now, from award-winning science writer Brian Dunning, the compelling reality of what is or isn't actually happening. The UFO movie they don't want you to see. Visit theufo.movie.
Yeah, so interesting trailer. And one of the things I just want to make sure that I comment on, because I made a note, you know, Mr. Dunning is apparently a science writer, but also he runs this nonprofit organization that's designed to educate people. And I was kind of taken with his presentation during this film, and more importantly, his use of, you know, his background in educating people. This is a film that's going to teach you something. It's going to, much like, you know, I found some parallels to what we do here. So I certainly enjoyed this film because of that. We try to educate people to do things like peel back the layers of deception that are used to put these really piss poor clickbait sensationalized UFO and alien stories together. He does it in a different way, but his sort of background in educating people and science really shines through. Also, important note, he interviewed some astrophysicists and other people. And of course, there's some speculation about, you know, going faster than light and how aliens might get here. But I also particularly enjoyed some of the science aspects of this film, because I wasn't even aware that I'm a little bit behind in my astronomy. Astronomy is kind of a, you know, hobby of mine. I've got some telescopes and sort of amateur skywatcher myself, and I was following when they started discovering exoplanets. But at some point, they started discovering exoplanets so frequently that I wasn't even aware of how many they were up to. And this film, which is a bit old now, he says it in the movie. In this film, he comments on the fact that they've already discovered over 5,000 exoplanets. And for those unaware what that term means is, that means planets from other star systems, not our own solar or, Earth star system here with our sun, but planets surrounding other suns. I had no idea they were up to 5,000 now. According to Mr. Dunning in this film, they're probably up to many, many more because so many are being discovered. So one aspect of the film is that he scientifically really investigates the possibility that there's intelligent life on other planets and that they are visiting us. And I found that to be interesting because a lot of skeptically minded individuals, including myself, get sort of, slammed by the true believers. But Mr. Dunning expresses the same kind of thing that I try to express here, which is, I would love it if aliens visited planet Earth. It would make the world so much more interesting and perhaps make us all feel a little less alone in the universe or something. I would love it. And you could tell in this film, he would love it if the aliens were real and really visiting us. So his skepticism doesn't come from, like a sour grapes, F these people kind of an attitude. It comes from, I think, frustration with the level of absolute total lack of actual evidence that some of these people sell these stories with, and the over sensationalized nature of it. And I got to say, there's a few cases that he goes over in this one section of this film that just completely destroys so many of the UFO mythology stories. And it's these stories that people keep repeating. I'm going to ask everybody within the sound of my voice a very important question. How many times have you heard some UFO talking head talk about the fact that UFOs can shut off nuclear weapons, right? They can just completely disable our nuclear arsenal. This has been a talking point of UFO true believers and UFO talking heads and promoters and grifters and scammers for decades now. And in this film, I'm gonna play that whole section. I'll try to stop it and comment it, and under the spirit of fair use, this gets completely and totally destroyed as a complete and total, most likely. I don't want to say complete and total. Let's say a 99% most likely complete and total work of fiction. No, UFOs don't have the capability to just shut down our nuclear arsenal. But a UFO profiteering huckster who was selling books would like you to think that, right? And we have talked about it here. The one I want to make sure that I'm fair. I don't want to just make a complete and total glowing review. The one thing that I thought was missing from this film, along with all of my praise that I will heap upon this film, I do have one very serious form of criticism. Mr. Dunning spends zero time really talking about or investigating the amount of money that is being made on UFOs, aliens, and more. After all, we have been detailing here, but maybe it's just his focus is science. He wasn't really thinking about the financial incentives that a lot of these grifter scammer, and to be clear, they're not all grifters and scammers, but most of them are. I've been doing this long enough that I'll go out on a limb and say most people selling alien and UFO stories are shady. But the one criticism I have is that he did not, I think the film would have been a little more complete if he included a section showing how much money people are making from UFO and alien stories. Because I've heard people that are not familiar with just how much money is being made. And let's be clear, it's a multi-million-dollar industry making UFO and alien stories. I think the film would be much more complete if he had put a section in there and shown some examples of how much money people make with the alien and UFO stories, or the potential for income. For example, we've detailed on our show that David Wilcock makes $1 million for selling a course basically on how to ascend, and then people give him $333 and nobody ascends, but he made $1 million on one course. That's how profitable this genre is to some people. And another example, and perhaps this is just because I've been focusing on this, another example that I think that he really should have included, especially because it's been a hot topic lately, is the Dave Grush story. Because I've been doing a countdown here. And by the way, today is 212 days of David Grush making huge claims with zero evidence shown so far. But we have detailed here and shown you with examples that the people selling David Grush stories have made collectively hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Somebody asked me if David Grush is getting paid from all of that. And the truth is, I don't know. But anybody can look at the monetized YouTube views that his interviews have generated, and people doing commentary about him, talking about him. What did he say this week? What did he say on this podcast? What did he say on Joe Rogan? And by the way, just in full fairness and disclosure, I'm one of those people. But you have to really understand that people that are skeptical of Dave Grush aren't making, we're making pennies. The people who are promoting this is all true. Those are the people making the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But one example, one of the best examples for why UFO and alien stories are a joke to me lately is because this guy, David Grush, has been making these huge claims for 212 days now and has provided absolutely, positively zero evidence, unless you count a fake UFO case that he put forth as real, the Mussolini UFO crash. I think that's a completely and totally fake case that was started by grifters, that was added onto by grifters, and more. So hundreds of thousands of dollars have been made by people pushing David Grush. And they have provided zero evidence, none. It's just stories. And yet, just from stories and a high-ranking government official that helps sells it, people have generated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that this film would have been a little bit better. To me, it would have been almost perfect to add a section, on all the money that these people are making. Literally, people are making millions of dollars. We can show you that Dr. Stephen Greer has collected millions of dollars. I don't know what his bottom line or profit is, but if he's been collecting millions of dollars for years and years and years, what has his profit been, and what has he actually provided? Stephen Greer's been at this for 30 plus years. He's never proven anything, and he's collected millions and millions of dollars. Oh, so just to circle back around, the reason that I think that Mr. Dunning should have included a section on the money is because some people that aren't really hugely into UFOs and aliens have said to me, like, well, why would all these people be lying? Well, when there's millions of dollars to be made, you'd be surprised how quickly people be willing to lie. Shit, I may become a whistleblower because I could use $1 million, right? Anyway, I just wanted to, at least in fairness, not just heap glowing praise on the film. The only other, I guess, criticism is no, I think that's it. Really, is just that he really should have included a section on what motivates people. He did, however, provide a really excellent breakdown of, sort of like we do here, like how does the UFO and alien grift work? Well, it works because the people selling the stories do not do basic research, and they do not try to, the test of falsifiability. And we've seen so many examples of this. For example, Jeremy Corbell selling a story that's really flares being dropped during a military exercise. Well, if he tried to falsify that story, eliminate all possibilities other than aliens, he would have quickly known. And I'm beyond thinking that, there's two possibilities. Either George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell are the dumbest, laziest UFO guys on planet Earth, or they knew those things were flares and not pyramid spaceships, or I'm sorry, triangle spaceships, in the case of the latest completely and totally fake story that they sold. So Mr. Dunning does do an excellent job at explaining sort of how these UFO and alien stories work. They work because the people selling these stories go out of their way to not identify what it is. And again, the best example that I could think of off the top of my head is Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's latest 100% provable fake, not a UFO story. They could have found out it was flares instantly if they did the least little bit of research. So either they knew and they purposefully deceived everybody because they knew they would make a whole bunch of money anyway, or they're the laziest, dumbest UFO guys on planet Earth who can't do 5 minutes of research before running to sell a story as aliens. It must be aliens, couldn't be flares. Well, you dummies, there's a military exercise happening right at the same place in the same time, the same location, and flares are involved. It looks like flares in the video you're sharing. Oh no, can't be flares. Remember, Corbell? Oh, can't be flares. It's definitely not flares. It was flares. And eventually the pressure of the weight of the evidence that it was flares got too much even for Corbell, and he had to admit it was flares, right? So Mr. Dunning does an excellent job at explaining some of the ways that these things work. And the other way, and I keep saying this here, and I wish he would have included this, is that a lot of these stories work by the lie by omission. And we've detailed that here. In order to sell that flare story, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp had to leave out important facts and information. And what was that important facts and information? That was the important facts that there was a military training exercise going on at the exact time and place that the video was taken at the same time. In order to sell that story as, oh, this is aliens, this is an alien spaceship, they had to leave out that important information. There was flares being dropped during a military exercise right over that area, right in the same geographic location, right at the same date, right at the same time. And I'm sorry, but I'm beyond thinking that these people are just making honest mistakes, because what you see from the grift and goon squad is that they make these mistakes over and over again. And again, I'm willing to admit that maybe they didn't know. But that either way, you shouldn't listen to these people, because either they're intentionally, purposefully deceiving people for money, or they're the laziest, griftiest, scammiest, scummiest UFO people that are not doing 5 minutes of research. Either way, you shouldn't listen to anything they have to say. Either they're deceiving you, or they're so lazy that a child could literally do a better job investigating some UFO case. So we're gonna play some of my favorite bits from this, and I apologize, I don't really have this queued up. But before we do that, we want to take a moment to welcome in the live chat and remind everybody that we are broadcasting to 8 locations at once tonight. We're on Instagram Live, Twitter, 2 separate Facebook feeds, Twitch, Pilled, Rumble. Maybe I'm forgetting one. No, I think I got them all. So welcome all the live chatters from everywhere. See, we have a bunch of people on Instagram. By the way, we just started broadcasting on Instagram. And for now, for whatever reason, they'll only allow us to do the first hour of our show on Instagram. We're still doing it. Please do follow me on Instagram. It's at Truthseekers Show on Instagram. And we welcome new distribution partner, Instagram. So we're going to share parts of this movie, and I don't want to share too much of it. I have more notes that I could share, but I wanted to give you a sense of, some of the things included in this movie. One of the things that Mr. Dunning does extremely well in this movie is to explain why we need a high bar of evidence. And he also sort of gets into that these people selling these stories, not only do they not have a high bar, for evidence, they have no bar, right?
The way we do that is to establish a very high.
I just want to mention, let me put my fair use banner up. So this is fair use. This is a transformative work. I don't think, we're going to be educating the public and critiquing the video that we are sharing. This is definitely a transformative work and a review of this excellent film. By the way, again, to the people who complain that I talk over stuff when I play, I have to do that for fair use. If you just want to watch the film, it's free, ad-supported on YouTube right now. It's in the description of our video or podcast here.
High bar for the quality of evidence that we're going to accept. If we present bad evidence, it weakens our case. So we will only accept good evidence. You might think this video looks like excellent quality evidence, but it's not. It's terrible. I know that because I made it myself using an app on my phone.
This is that he used that app on it's an Android app, and I think it's available on iPhone too, where you can just film something like a skyline and add different UFOs to it. And he created this himself, and good for him for including that example of just how easy it is to fake UFO and alien evidence.
Phone to add a flying saucer to my video. But you should have known it was terrible evidence too, because all videos or pictures are what we call anecdotal evidence. That refers to anything that can't be directly studied or tested. I can directly study and test this rock.
Yeah, and here, again, I just want to compliment him. You can tell he has a background in education, because most teachers or educators that I have known, they're very good at explaining things. And this is just an excellent explanation for why video and picture evidence is so piss poor. You can't analyze it. You can't study it. It's not a physical thing. And that's why those sites like Third Phase of Moon is a joke. Who cares? I don't care if they post 1,000 more shitty, grainy videos, whether they make them themselves, pay people to make them. They're garbage peddlers. And their entire existence has no value. Third Phase of Moon is worthless. Everybody that works for Third Phase of Moon is worthless, because they've made hundreds of thousands of dollars providing grainy, shitty, fake, hoaxed videos for decades, right? They have no value.
Because I'm holding it. But you can't because you're just watching it on a video. As far as you're able to prove, it might be nothing more than a special effect. Pictures or videos will never meet that high bar of evidence that we need. Millions of people are better than me at faking videos. And more than half a century ago, hoaxers were throwing hubcaps in the air and absolutely persuading many that they took authentic photos of a flying saucer.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that hoaxers throughout the decades have used various methods. You know, back in the day, they would have to literally throw something in the air or hang it from strings and shit, because they didn't have CGI or they didn't have a way to digitally superimpose things. Later, people started using things like double exposure, or, you know, they would cut a picture of a flying saucer out of a negative and glue it into another negative of a sky scene. So it's interesting that hoaxers have always used whatever methods they had available to them. And now with the realm of digital, the hoaxes have become almost indistinguishable from a real event.
People accepted bad evidence, and the result was that they were wrong. Verbal stories, or stories presented on UFO TV programs, are also completely anecdotal and very untrustworthy. They get more and more exaggerated every time they're retold. Even though the people on these shows often seem trustworthy, we have to force ourselves to not simply believe everything on television.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've made this specific point here that he's making, and he makes it several times throughout this film. And in one case, oh boy, the Rendlesham Forest case, boy, does he just destroy that. And even present some things that I was not aware of. People have been asking me to cover the Rendlesham Forest event since I began this show. And I've always avoided it because I was aware of something. And we're going to share with you what I was aware of. He details it beautifully here. But the point that he makes here is incredibly important. Every time the story is on another television show or another documentary, it gets added on to. Not always, but many, many times. It gets expanded. It becomes more grandiose. Now there's a new part to the story, and Rendlesham Forest is the perfect example of that. And he busts the whole myth of Rendlesham Forest to garbage in like 3 minutes. It's just the best takedown of Rendlesham Forest. I don't think I'm going to cover Rendlesham Forest. Anytime anybody asks me about it, I'm going to play his explanation for why Rendlesham Forest is most likely a completely and totally fake story. That, again, just like the point we've made here and the point that he's making at this point in the film, these things get tacked onto, added onto, expanded. The stories get more grandiose, not always, but very, very frequently. There's always new parts to the story. A lot of people are fond of somehow this is evidence that Bob Lazar's telling the truth. Oh, his story never changed. Yes, it has. Slightly different ways over the years, but yes, it has changed. They added on the part where Bob Lazar might have seen an alien at Area 51. Later, Bob Lazar says on Joe Rogan for the first time ever that he believes they got the alien spacecraft from an archaeological dig. That's all new. That wasn't in the original story in 1989, right? And excellent points that he makes here about how these things work. And the point that he makes here is also sorely needed. If you're going to investigate UFOs and aliens, you need an incredibly high bar of evidence. You can't just accept stories and say, it must be true because this person is telling this story, or it must be true because we have these grainy-ass videos, grainy-ass photos. It's all anecdotal. That's what we get in UFO land, anecdotes. We never or rarely ever get testable, verifiable physical evidence of anything.
We have to force ourselves to be open to information that's not what we want to hear. This is how we improve our knowledge. Another way we scrutinize evidence to make sure it meets our high bar is to try to falsify our theories.
This is extremely important. And this is one of the major ways that the whole UFO and alien scam works, and how the scammers make it work. I can provide you with 100 examples of ways that UFO and alien scammers do not do falsifiability. First example, third phase of moon. Do you remember how we busted them, completely and totally busted them, selling a high altitude balloon as an alien, the best UFO photo or the best UFO video of what was it, 2022 or 2023? I don't remember. It's been a while. I showed that with flightradar24.com, they could have identified that object in the video as a high altitude balloon in 35 seconds. They could have found out what that object was. They could have known for sure, oh, this is a high altitude balloon, according to flight radar tracking. In the same exact area, the same location the video was taken. And just to be clear, the original video that they sold as the best UFO of whatever year, it had the date, the time, and the location of the sighting in the video. So myself and many other people went to Flight Radar 24 and found out instantly. I did it. I timed myself. It took 35 seconds to identify what that object in the video depicted really was. A high altitude balloon. Third phase of moon, they didn't have 35 seconds. They did not try to eliminate all other possibilities, because to do so would mean they couldn't sell it as a UFO. And I'm beyond, maybe I'm just getting too critical and too cynical here, but I'm beyond thinking that these people are this stupid. And I believe in many cases, including Third Phase of Moon and others, they do it on purpose so that they could sell the story. If they were to do the 35 seconds of research like I did and showed you all, they couldn't sell the story. So they purposefully, I call it the lie by omission, but Mr. Dunning is making an excellent point here, and that is they don't try to eliminate all other possibilities first before running right to UFOs. It's got to be aliens, right? We've seen it so many times. Another great example is Linda Moulton Hale gets sent a photo of an alien. And instead of doing a 5-second Google reverse image search and finding out that that alien was from the cover of a video game, she runs to sell it as a genuine picture of an alien taken on the moon. And in another example, Linda Moulton Hale gets sent some images of a alleged alien on an autopsy table. And instead of doing, again, a 5-second reverse Google image search and finding out that those were 3D generated CGI fakes of an alien autopsy, she ran right to, this is a genuine, real picture of an orange-gray alien, and she made all this money. Both times she made all this money. Award-winning. Listen, maybe I get angry sometimes. I did not have the benefit of a college education in journalism like Linda Moulton Hale had, but I know how to do research, and I know how to try to eliminate all other possibilities before jumping right in and saying it's definitely an alien. Linda Moulton Hale is incredibly well educated, right? She has all the benefits of a college education in journalism, where they taught her to do things like eliminate other possibilities before jumping to conclusions. She never does that. Everything's aliens and alien spaceships to her. Do you know why? Because that's where the money is. Why would you want to tell people, well, here's an image of an alien, and somebody sent it to me and said it was a real alien, but it's not. It's from a video game cover. That wouldn't be money. Oh, here's an image of an alien. Somebody told me it was from an alien autopsy, but it turns out it's from a fictional web series about Men in Black in Argentina or Brazil or something. So it's not real. That would not be a story that she could sell and profit from. And another excellent example of people that don't try to eliminate possibilities is what I said before, Jeremy Corbell and these flares, or Jeremy Corbell and the Boca pyramids, or Jeremy Corbell and everything they sell. They don't do any investigation. They call themselves UFO investigators. All they investigate is how much money can we make selling this shit. That's how far they go investigating. That's all they care about. And I'm sorry to sound so cynical and critical, but that's the conclusions that I've reached after this time. Let's do a little bit more of this, and then we're going to get to the Rendlesham bombshell.
What does the cancer researcher want most of all? She wants to find a cure for the particular cancer she's working on. So if she gets the slightest positive result, the cancer responded slightly better to this one candidate drug than to the others, she knows the most premature and foolhardy thing she can do is to immediately declare, yay, I've found it. This cancer has been cured.
No, and he's going to make the point here, and this is an incredible point. They have to eliminate every other possibility before they jump to the conclusions.
Instead,
that's how real science works. Ufologists are not scientists. They're garbage peddlers for the most part.
She has to search for any possible alternate explanation for that positive result so she can eliminate it. Maybe it was caused by residue from cleaning her test equipment. The most important step she takes is to find ways to falsify any positive result.
There you go. So all these UFO and alien people, they don't try to falsify that it's not UFO, it's not alien spaceships. They just jump right to alien spaceships. And next he gets into the solved cases. And this is where it gets extremely interesting, because he's about to completely, I'm sorry if you came here and you've always had a disclosure boner for the Rendlesham Forest case. Yeah, that one's fake too. And there's ample and supportive evidence that that case is completely and totally fake, which he's going to break down here. And I've never seen it this succinctly, clear that that case is fake and why. But we're going to get it in a moment here.
Got a large mushroom pizza.
Hold on one second here. Let me go by. I did say it's free, ad supported. So I did not normally I mirror this or I take clips, but a little short on time today, working on the new MIDI studio here. Let's just go back to it. Here we go. Sorry about that.
So now let's look at the evidence we have through this filter of setting the bar high, and let's falsify everything we can. I want to start with a couple of really bad examples just to illustrate how easy it is for a really amazing story to spread when nobody subjects it to any scrutiny.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There is a complete and total lack of scrutiny from the people that are selling these stories. We have detailed here numerous times. One of my favorite examples of this is All the Criminals. Do you know how many UFO and alien stories, the primary source of which is a convicted kitty predator? We'll say it that way. They don't like the P word on YouTube. There's a whole lot of people using convicted offenders that, are convicted felons, and they're convicted felons for having attacked children as sources, primary sources for their UFOs and alien stories. We've detailed how Kerry Cassidy uses a convicted murderer. The guy's been in prison for 35 years. She's saying that essentially he teleports out of his prison cell and he goes and saves Earth on secret space program missions. Captain Mark Richards. The guy's been in prison for 35 years. What does he know about the secret space program? Nothing. But it's a great source because that guy's sitting around in jail with nothing better to do than to invent fake stories so Kerry Cassidy can make a few bucks selling stories to stupid people. There have been many UFO investigators that are really shady criminal people. The best example I can think of off the top of my head was Wendell Stevens, who was a twice convicted child person. Yeah. And even after he did jail time for it, and the whole entire UFO community knew that he was arrested and convicted and did jail time for that, he was working UFO conventions probably up till the day he died. And people made excuses. Oh, the CIA framed him. Then we got Stan Romanek, remember? Stan Romanek, he was collecting CP. So, and he got arrested. I think he's still in jail for it right now. We had Jan Harzan. He tried to go meet a 13-year-old girl. So I just want to make the point that these people are shady people. You know, not all of them. I've met some really good people in this community. So I don't want to say everybody's a criminal, but a lot of them, to me, number one, so many of them display criminal-like attitudes and behavior. Look at how scammy some of these people are. And they have no regard whatsoever for the victims of their scams. Remember, Richard Dolan famously laughed when people were upset with him for backing the Roswell slides hoax, right? He laughed. We showed it here. He laughed at people who were upset because they wasted $100 on a pay-per-view event for completely and totally fake nonsense that he backed, promoted, appeared at. He laughed at everyone. That's the trait of a narcissistic sociopath or psychopath. They have no empathy for their victims, right? All these people, maybe they didn't have the money to waste, right, on nonsense. He didn't care. He laughed. Look at some of the behavior that we see from some of these other figures we've covered here, like Corey Good or David Wilcock. David Wilcock is essentially making his fans pay his way out of, what was it, $1.4 million in IRS tax debt? Like it's his fans' fault that he didn't pay his taxes for 15 years or however long it was. That's the trait of a criminal. They don't care about their victims. And just to be clear, I want to make it clear that what I'm saying here is my views, thoughts, and views. Mr. Dunning is much more measured and professional in his views. He didn't call the Grift Squad or criminals. He just said essentially they don't do what is necessary, which is real investigation and having standards of evidence. So I just want to make it clear that my views are my own and they don't reflect, well, anybody can watch the movie and see. He's a little more professional in his talking points. I've just gotten too cynical, and I've seen too many people getting ripped off by these scammy, shady people over the years. And I've reached a point where, like, I have no filter. Like, I don't care. People could say whatever they're going to say. When I express my belief and opinion that there's a lot of shady, scammy people in the UFO community, I can back up that statement with a mountain of evidence to prove it. So if you don't like it, and that's one other thing. I always say this, like, I don't understand how people can ignore all the shady scamminess, right? We have this Joe Murgia taking a shot at me on Twitter recently. Hey, Joe Murgia, all your heroes are grifting scumbags, Joe Murgia, right? And liars. Those are your heroes, Joe Murgia. People who have been lying to people and scamming the people and selling completely and totally fake stories. And those people are credible, but he took a shot at me and he said, I'm not credible. Hey, Joe Murgia, you dumb dickhead. I have never once been caught profiting from a completely and totally fake story. And all of your heroes, Jeremy Corbell and Lou Elizondo and Tom DeLonge, they all have. And by the way, you helped the TTSA scam. You promoted and supported the TTSA thing, right? How many millions of dollars did they scam from investors, right? How many investors got their money back, Joe Murgia? But you're going to take a shot at me and say I'm not credible? And these are your heroes, these scammy, scummy people who keep getting caught, right? It's a great community. Oh, my point is, I don't understand how people can hold these people up on pedestals and worship them like they're some kind of heroes when they keep getting caught scamming the public. Right? These are your heroes, scammy people. Well, let's get back to Mr. Dunning, who will say much more professional things than me. I've just had it. I've reached my wit's end with all of this.
Where do we find these? On television, of course. People forget that TV shows are entertainment. Nobody at the network cares how accurate it is.
Yeah, and a perfect example of nobody at the network caring how accurate it is. Jeremy Corbell's going to have a new docu-series on Tubi. And in the promo, they show all of Jeremy Corbell's completely identified fake UFOs as if they're not UFOs or as if they're still UFOs, right? No, those aren't UFOs. Do you think the people at Tubi care that there's fake videos throughout the whole trailer? Fake UFOs throughout the whole trailer? They don't care. Nobody at the networks cares. Do you think History Channel cares if David Wilcock is full of shit? No, they just care about the ratings.
They only care that you watch.
There you go.
And so they let the stories get exaggerated and completely distorted.
Here it is, the Rendlesham Forest bomb. The bomb.
One of these is the Rendlesham Forest case from 1980. At a U.S. Air Force base inside England, airmen on duty saw some bright lights flashing through the trees of Rendlesham Forest just outside the base perimeter. They went to investigate and found what they described as a craft of unknown origin landed inside the forest. They approached it, and one of the men studied and touched it for 45 minutes, logging the details in a notebook. But they were ordered never to discuss what happened.
Yeah, so that's the official story. Sounds great, doesn't it? But it only sounds great if you don't know the whole story.
And so it's been called one of the great UFO cover-ups in history.
Oh, there was a cover-up, all right, but it wasn't the government covering up what really happened. It was the people selling the story.
Something that nearly always happens with stories like this. that get told and retold on TV shows is that each network has to outdo the last one. And so the eyewitnesses' stories get magnified and expanded every time another network tells it. When we go back to the original documentation, the actual records from that night, they tell a very different story. Now, the men did indeed follow a flashing light through the trees, and suspecting that there might have been a crash of some kind in the forest, they called the local constables.
Yeah, and that's interesting here. They never give you the whole story of Rendlesham, but here, Mr. Dunning is going to give you the original story. And just like he said, every time they need to make more money, the story gets expanded upon. One thing he left out, we'll get to that in a moment. He did leave one part out that got tacked on later as well.
Who, being familiar with the area, found that the men were seeing nothing more than the flashing light of Orford Ness Lighthouse, about 6 miles away, and they did not investigate further. A colonel from the base accompanied the men with an audio recorder and recorded the following.
Yeah, this is a very, very famous audio recording. Oh, look at the lights.
You saw a light where? Right in this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flashback there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it? We don't know, sir. So you have to tag it somewhere? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light.
Now, every lighthouse has its own unique interval for how often it flashes.
And here is where good research matters, right? And again, the people selling this whole story as a mystery could have done what Mr. Dunning does in a moment here. They didn't do that. Why did they not do this? Why did they not do this? Because then the mystery would be solved. No aliens, no UFO, no alien spacecraft. And how much money do you think has been generated from Rendlesham Forest stories and documentaries and book deals? I think it would be fair to say that at least $1 million has been generated from this story. And when we see in a moment here what the likeliest explanation for the entire story is, it's a laugh riot. Just as in the David Grush example, hundreds of thousands of dollars being made off of a story with no evidence. Here, perhaps millions of dollars has been made from the Rendlesham Forest stories on television, documentaries, whatever, book deals, speaking fees, right? Some of these guys made careers out of this for decades. But the story falls apart.
That way, mariners can identify which lighthouse they're seeing. The Orford Ness Lighthouse, which is sadly gone now, flashed at an interval of exactly 5 seconds. So let's hear that audio again, but with a beep added every 5 seconds.
This is one of the best debunks I've ever seen. This is just brilliant work to solve the mystery. And remember, all the people that have ever been involved with selling the Rendlesham Forest story could have done this and could have showed people this. They chose not to. Why? Ask yourself, why would they not show people what Mr. Dunning is showing people?
You saw a light where? Right in this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flashback there. There it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it?
What about the guy who said he examined the craft in the forest, writing down the details in his notebook?
Oh, so interestingly, if they put the beep every 5 seconds, it directly corresponds to the audio that was recorded that night. And every time the person on the tape says, there it is again, it's in 5-second intervals. And I believe that the tape is longer, but I'm sure this was edited down, just to make it concise. He proved his point.
That didn't become a part of the story until 1996, 16 years after it happened. He'd given other interviews on TV shows as recently as 1994 and had never said anything about seeing a craft.
Yeah, so when the story first began, it was just we saw lights through the trees. That was the original story. We saw these mysterious lights through the trees. They didn't mention seeing a craft on the ground or touching it or interacting until 16 years later.
And it wasn't until another TV show in 2003 that he first mentioned having a notebook. Back in 1980, when this happened, he had told the Air Force interviewer that they followed the flashing light but couldn't get very close to it. And that's all. Then every time a new TV show came out about this story, it got bigger and bigger, and more story elements were invented.
Yeah, and that is how this works. Listen, if you are being interviewed and you saw flashing lights through the trees, but then you came across a clearing and saw the craft on the ground, that would seem to be an incredibly important detail that you would say in the first interview. He didn't. Or what are we going to get? The recovered memories excuses? Oh, maybe he went through a hypnotic regression and remembered more about that night. No, I think it's clear that the story was added onto and expanded and became more and more grand and sensational every time the story was sold.
Go back to the original accounts, and it's documented that nothing interesting happened at all. There's no evidence that any of the events added by the TV shows ever happened. So Rendlesham Forest does not satisfy our standard of evidence.
Oh, just completely destroyed. And if everybody that has ever had a disclosure boner over Rendlesham Forest, sorry, not sorry, I think it's incredibly clear that that story is at least largely embellished, added upon. And one of the things that Mr. Dunning did not, I'm sure, and listen, this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation. One of the other parts of the story that got tacked on and added on was for another documentary or television special, in which one of the original witnesses suddenly remembered that when he touched the craft that there was no evidence for in the original story and no mention of, he suddenly got a binary message, and the binary message was somehow telepathically communicated to him. That wasn't in the original story. That wasn't in the original reports. No mention of that. Nobody mentioned that in their original interviews. It wasn't until years later, I think decades later, that suddenly one of the witnesses remembered that when he touched the craft, he got a telepathic download of binary code, and he wrote all the binary down in a notepad or something. No, I would think that's an important part of the story, and you would mention that in your original interview. And nobody did. And again, millions of dollars have been made from the Rendlesham Forest marketing efforts, right? It's a business. It's an industry. So we're going to do one more of the cases, and that's Maelstrom. And the reason that I think that is so important, and listen, he pretty much busts Ariel School, Maelstrom, the nuclear, myth, and the Jimmy Carter UFO as well. So how many times have you heard UFO talking heads say, well, even presidents have seen UFOs, like Jimmy Carter had a sighting. He explains Jimmy Carter exactly. He solves the mystery. Even to Mr. Carter, President Carter's satisfaction, that's what it was. It wasn't a UFO. It was this. That's included in the film. I don't want to play too much of this. And also, by the way, I want to ask you to all do me a favor. Anybody who's watching my sort of review here and analysis, please do go into the description of our video and watch this documentary. It's so important to me that people support real efforts at real investigative scientific analysis of this stuff. And, all of these grifter scammers, they have an easy time with their clickbait, sensationalized nonsense getting views. Somebody does it the right way, it's really an uphill battle. I was kind of surprised to see, he's doing great with this video. It was available for purchase for a time, and I apologize, I didn't get to it. I had on my list to buy. And by the way, I'm still going to buy it just to support Mr. Dunning's effort. And maybe you should too, so you can watch it commercial free. I'm going to buy it. But make sure you click on the video in the description here or just search YouTube for the UFO movie they don't want you to see, and give them some support. Watch the film. Send the link to some of your friends that are into UFOs. I would appreciate that, because it's important that we support people. You know, people ask me all the time, well, who's credible, Stephen? Well, we can add Mr. Dunning to the list of people that are credible and doing a good job, not just selling, fake stories.
That's the way we go.
Oh, here we go again. Speaking of the ad supported, 1 second. So we're going to do the explanation for Maelstrom, which I think is funny, because isn't Green Street going after the originator of the Maelstrom mythology? And his stories are completely inconsistent. But I think, boy, how many times have we heard a UFO talking head say UFOs are often sighted over nuclear bases, and they can even shut down nuclear weapons? Well, it turns out that the whole source to that falls apart, completely and totally falls apart under scrutiny. Completely and totally falls apart.
Perhaps the most concerning of all the government UFO accounts is the story that you may have heard about UFOs being found to have the ability to disable United States nuclear missiles. If anything would warrant official investigation, it would be that, right? So here's Congressman Mike Gallagher grilling representatives of the U.S. Navy's UAP task force at a congressional hearing in May 2022.
Before we get to that, I just want to make sure I mention, if that congressperson had been given the information that Mr. Dunning presents about this case, he never would have cared. He never would have asked that question during a congressional hearing. He never would have bothered to concern himself with this case, because this case completely and totally falls apart. And by the way, the main profiteer and promoter of this story, who's written several books and is, speaking at UFO conferences and all this other stuff, he has a financial motive to continue the story. But besides this original, his original story is this one that, we'll get into the story here through the film. But later, he suddenly remembers being abducted by aliens as well. I'm sorry, stay in your lane. When they suddenly come up with brand new stories that they didn't tell originally, that gets into Griff Squad territory, if you ask me. Let's get into this Maelstrom case and how it completely and totally falls apart. And by the way, I just want to mention that it wasn't that long ago, maybe a year ago, somebody was telling me, who's sort of on the true believer side, that this person, the originator of the Maelstrom Air Force Base story, was going to be testifying before Congress, and he was going to be a whistleblower, and they're finally going to have to give us disclosure. And I said, no, that guy's a wackadoo, and I think that even his original story is fake. People argued with me. Try arguing that original story is likely fake after seeing what is presented here. It completely blows the story to hell.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed and interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly, and not just ranges, but some facilities housing our strategic nuclear forces. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this.
Remember, a lot of these stories are disinformation and misinformation. Here, Mr. Gallagher says, at the exact same time, a red orb was spotted overhead. A UFO was spotted overhead at the exact time that the missiles became inoperable. Well, that's not really real information, and we'll see why.
I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Bray. If you've been looking at UAPs over the last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Okay, but are you aware of the report, or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
Well, I have, because it's been publicly available for a long time.
Isn't it interesting that Mr. Dunning, a podcast host, has access to that information, but the government's own people in charge of UFO investigation somehow don't have that information? It's been publicly available for a long time.
The event Gallagher is referring to happened in 1967, well over half a century ago, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, home to the 341st Strategic Missile Wing of Minuteman ICBMs. The only reason anyone knows about this incident is this book, Fated Giant, co-written in 2005 by UFO author Robert Salas. He's written at least 3 books about UFOs, and he was actually one of the missile officers on duty that day in 1967. So to learn more about this, I called up a friend of mine.
My name is Hal Bidlack. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. In my career, I spent my first assignment as a finger-on-the-button guy, an ICBM launch officer. I ultimately earned a PhD and taught at the Air Force Academy for much of my career.
Are there a lot of missileers out there?
It's a relatively small and tight community within the military.
And by the way, I think this is an excellent use of, I don't know if that's a real background or anyway. And by the way, just to comment, the whole production of this movie is pretty good. There's not a lot of glitz and glamour. It's not real, there's not like super fancy transitions or a lot of digital effects. It's just clean and well produced. An excellent use of an expert witness, because this person has a similar experience to the person making the claims.
So had you heard this story before?
No, and frankly, that makes me suspicious. As I said, it's a small, tight community, and odd things do happen where missiles break from time to time, and we know about those. But the fact that I've never heard of this story is yet another reason to suspect it's of doubtful origin.
A lot of people have tried to find out what really happened there, including by filing Freedom of Information Act requests. In 2001, the Air Force responded with 84 pages.
Yeah, and of course, God bless John Greenwald Jr. from the Black Vault, because here Mr. Greenwald got 84 pages, which, people who are making a real effort to investigate the event can use to gain clarity about what actually or really happened during that event.
A lot of it consisted of the reports of technicians from Boeing, which built the Minuteman, and these technicians were called in to investigate and figure out what went wrong. Apparently, an entire flight of 10 missiles all did reboot themselves on that day. The report focused on the power to these launch facilities. How do these launch facilities get their power?
Well, just like any homeowner, they plug into the grid. That is the primary source of power. There's also backups in terms of batteries and diesel generators should that power fail or be out of tolerance.
So according to this now declassified 1967 report from Malmstrom Air Force Base, Fergus Electric is the company that supplied the commercial power. So earlier in the film, Mr. Dunning goes on to explain this concept of, falsifying, which means before you jump to aliens as an excuse, as an explanation for what happened, you have to eliminate all other possibilities. But here we see that there's a very good explanation for what actually happened during this event that all the people selling the story never talked about. I've never heard Robert Salas acknowledge even that this happened. He leaves it out of his story. And why does he do that? Because most rational and reasonable people would say, well, that's a much more likely explanation of what happened during this event than aliens disabled nuclear weapons somehow, with their alien technology. It says here, a 7.2 kilovolt transformer shorted in the line to site Echo 3 at 1450 March 16th, 1967. This transformer is located on a farm 2 miles south of the Winifred substation. Automatic reclosure switches at Winifred substation opened and were reclosed manually after transformer replacement later in the day. This caused the brine chiller problem at Echo 1. Sites Echo 3, 5, 6, 9, and 10 transferred to standby power. Site Echo 1 transferred to direct current operation. Then it goes on to talk about the same thing happening at sites 7 and 8. But does that seem to make sense to you?
Absolutely. The ICBM sites are by design in very rural and distant locations, and they rely on the local power grid.
Yeah, so if power is lost, the missiles, just like a computer, like if you, let's say we've all have, has anybody else experienced this? Maybe just me, because I live in an area where there's frequent, weird, very short power failures. Like every once in a while, there's literally a 10 or 20 second power failure, right? And what happens to your computer if there's a power failure? And then the power goes back on in 10 seconds. Well, it'll reboot. And missile systems are very similar. They're computer related. So if the power is completely lost, they're going to reboot. And, you know, Robert Salas' explanation for this is that aliens did it. Sorry, not sorry. It's much more likely that it was just a power failure.
They're also designed to protect themselves. So yes, if a current problem occurred, they would cut themselves off from that. They'd restart their electrical power and wait for the outside current to stabilize.
Could a power event like this cause the missiles to reboot themselves?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be a common event, but it's also not unheard of.
So if the only thing that happened was this power surge from the blown transformer, and that caused the missiles to reboot normally, how long were they actually down for? The report goes on to say that the exact time estimates couldn't be established, but it was approximately 10 to 40 seconds that the missiles were offline.
Seems reasonable.
So in your experience, an event like what we're talking about would have been unremarkable enough that you say you hadn't heard of it?
Well, in that time and place, it would be remarkable just because it's very uncommon to have anything out of the ordinary happen. Missiles have about a 99.9% reliability and on-alert record. So it would certainly be known at the time, but it would not be passed down through the years as some kind of shocking event.
In his books, Salas actually attributed the missile restarts not to the power outage, but to UFOs, the glowing red orbs that Congressman Gallagher asked about.
Yeah, and listen, now we get into a situation of cognitive bias and people's belief systems influencing what they believe about certain events. Maybe Mr. Salas is predisposed to believe UFOs and aliens and whatever, and so he attributed UFOs and aliens as the likely explanation for what had occurred. But also, just from a logic perspective, like, let's think about this for a moment. There's a power failure that very likely could have caused these missiles to reboot and be offline for 10 to 40 seconds. Or aliens from another star system came all the way here, light years, they traveled light years to then go fly over our nuclear missiles and turn off some nuclear missiles for 10 to 40 seconds. Then they flew light years all the way back home to their home planet on another star system. Like, if you weigh the possibilities here, it is absolutely sensationalistic nonsense to believe that aliens came here from another star system just to turn off our missiles for 10 to 40 seconds and then flew all the way back home. Or maybe it was just a power failure, Robert Salas. And maybe you should give all the money back that you made selling all these books and shit, right?
Well, the Air Force did check that out. They found, quote, rumors of unidentified flying objects around the area of Echo flight during the time of fault were disproven. A mobile strike team, which had checked all November flight's launch facilities on the morning of March 16th, 1967, were questioned and stated that no unusual activity or sightings were observed.
So where did his thoughts of seeing UFOs in that area come from? And isn't it interesting that Mr. Salas can't keep his facts and dates straight? And we're going to see a clip about that in a moment, because he was recently confronted. Well, I don't know how recently. Stephen Greenstreet of the New York Post did it appears to be a very contentious interview with Mr. Salas, the person making these claims. And isn't it interesting? The Air Force investigated. Oh, there's rumors of flying saucers, but there was no unusual activity. These are disproven claims. There was no UFOs over the nuclear missiles at the time of the reboot event. So is Mr. Salas just wrong, or is he conflating two completely and totally separate events into one story?
Here is what actually happened. That power outage caused all 10 missiles to reboot themselves. They were down for no more than 10 to 40 seconds total. Then, 8 days later, in the town of Belt, Montana, someone reported seeing a UFO to the local paper. There's no logical reason to conclude one thing had anything to do with the other.
Yeah, and this is another often used plot device. Conflation of two separate events. It happens all the time in UFO stories. One thing is completely and totally disconnected, has nothing to do with the other thing, but they get thrown together. Did you know before the Roswell crash, there was sightings of a UFO? I think it was several days or a week, maybe a little more. I'm a little gray on the specifics. It's been a while. But there was UFO sightings around the Roswell area a few days or a week before the crash. Somehow that gets tacked on to the crash event. These are two completely and totally separate events that may have nothing to do with each other. So according to the Air Force who investigated, there was no UFOs over Maelstrom on the date that Robert Salas said this event happened, or on the date that it is confirmed through paperwork here that there was a power failure and a missile reboot event. Two separate events conflated into one story.
38 years later, Salas writes a book about what he thinks he remembers. And he's sure the UFO and the missile reboots were on the same day at the same place. The records show he's wrong. I think he's probably honestly mistaken. 38 years is a long time. But regardless, he's wrong. And
not only is he wrong, see, here's where it gets on my nerves. I'm going to say it that way. Here's where it gets on my nerves, because how many times have we heard talking UFO heads use this story as proof that aliens are here, right? Oh, they can even shut down our missiles. That's been proven. That's established fact. No, it's not. If you peel back the layers of deception used to create this story, it completely and totally falls apart. And that means that any idiot repeating this story as a true and real story is also in on it. This is how mythology is created. This isn't science. This isn't facts. This is garbage peddling. This is how garbage peddling. How many times have we heard people repeat this story? I've heard Richard Dolan talk about it. I've heard many different people talk about it. The story's not accurate as originally written in Mr. Salas's for-profit books.
now today we've got something of a conspiracy theory community who believe it's impossible that he was mistaken, and therefore the Air Force must be covering up the truth, a truth revealed in the book.
So, Colonel Bidlack, you and Salas both worked in a field dealing with a lot of classified events.
You bet.
If the Air Force classified something or covered it up, would you be allowed to freely write about it and reveal it?
No, I could not. If I chose to do that, I'd be setting myself up for significant problems under the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Publishing
So that's interesting. If
about
this was confidential or top secret event or classified, Robert Salas would be prosecuted for talking about it. But you know what's not classified and what he won't be prosecuted for? Works of fiction. Works of fiction won't get you prosecuted. The United States government doesn't care if people are lying and selling fake stories.
about classified events is no joke. Mark Owen was the pen name of one of the Navy SEALs who got bin Laden, and he wrote a 2012 book about it called No Easy Day. To get the book out fast, he and his publisher decided to skip submitting the book to the Department of Defense for review.
That would turn out to be a very costly mistake.
Owen never got charged with a crime, but he had to turn over all $6.8 million in royalties that he'd made and give it to the government. Tom Clancy, author of the Jack Ryan novels, famously got questioned by the FBI after his book, The Hunt for Red October, came out.
That's interesting, and I never knew that.
Apparently, it did reveal classified information, but he showed them all the legal sources where he got everything. So there wasn't anything they could do.
So he went on to write freely about this. He wrote about it in 2 more books. He's spoken about it on podcasts, and he's spoken about it at UFO conferences. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you the Air Force just doesn't care, which strongly suggests that it's fiction. And as we know, fiction is not classified.
So the only evidence that UFOs can deactivate our nuclear missiles is one man's 38-year-old memories that contradict everything that's in the record. That's about as anecdotal as it gets. The claim of UFOs having the ability to disable nuclear arsenals does not meet any reasonable standard of evidence.
Yeah, so that's great, because that means that every idiot that has repeated these talking points is completely and totally wrong, and they're using very incredibly flawed information. And Mr. Salas does not like to be challenged, and we're still citing fair use. This is another source, Stephen Greenstreet of the New York Post. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to hear this whole interview, and I hope it's all this spicy and this juicy. Stephen Greenstreet recently posted this, and he said, "Happy New Year, UFO Twitter. More fireworks from the basement office coming in 2024. This is just awesome. Apparently, it got a little heated during his interview, but Greenstreet said he did sit there and take all his questions, and he did complete the interview. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get to see an interview with this man, Robert Salas, who just happened to leave out of his story the reasonable explanation of what really happened that day, and just so happened to conflate UFOs from 8 days later to the same event that happened with the missiles. He doesn't like to be challenged. And here we're going to see a perfect example of that. Again, we're citing fair use. This is a transformative work. We're educating the public.
You say that you were at November flight on March 16th, and that November had some of its missiles go offline. You later changed that to you were at Oscar flight a week later on March 24th. What happened?
I don't really know what your objective in this interview is, my friend.
Oh no!
I'm talking about
if you're trying to tear down my story, you're barking up the wrong tree. So I don't know what your purpose is here, but I don't like it.
Sir, I'm just asking. I'm trying to figure this out in my head.
Can we pause here? Can we pause this?
You say that
Can we pause the interview? He wanted to take a pause, right? Yeah, very, very interesting. So not only does Mr. Salas get his dates and his facts wrong, and conflate different events, he doesn't like to be challenged, right? And why didn't he include the explanation of the power failure? There is literally documents that show what happened on that date, at that time, at that place. You know, why doesn't he include that? And you know how many times I've heard the Maelstrom story being told on a UFO TV show or documentary? I'm sure it was on UFO Hunters on the History Channel, and nobody ever includes all the information that Mr. Dunning provides in this movie. The UFO movie, they don't want you to see. I think there's a reason for that. We've talked about this ad nauseum here. The lie by omission. Don't include all the information, because some of that information doesn't really fit with our story about UFOs and aliens. And if we include that information, reasonable and rational people will say, it was just a power failure. It didn't have anything to do with aliens, dude. But that's not what we get. What we get in the UFO community is layers upon layers of deception. We get conflations of multiple stories. We get the lie by omission. We get people purposefully not investigating anything so that they can just sell it as UFOs and aliens. So I didn't want to go through too much of this movie. I think we're going to play any playback of any more clips there. I would like to just talk, and I have some more notes. Also included in this film, and it's actually the longest portion of the film, is Mick West completely and totally destroying those 3 videos that came from Lou Elizondo and the gang. I don't understand why Mick West gets such, vitriol and hatred from the UFO community. It's like, do you not want to know if something's not what people are selling it to you as? And let's be clear, Lou Elizondo knew that those things weren't aliens. I believe he knew they weren't aliens. On the release form, it says balloons, drones, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. He knew those 3 videos had nothing to do with aliens. They were not anything extraordinary. And this is my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. But hey, if we pretend it's UFOs and aliens, we can make a lot of money here, and no one can argue that Lou Elizondo made a lot of money. Book deals, speaking at UFO conference deals, TV show deals. He was getting paid to be a part of TTSA, right? And they collected millions of dollars claiming things about those videos that just aren't true, that just don't hold up under scrutiny. The Go Fast is my favorite. Oh, that thing's really booking. It's doing thousands of miles an hour. No, it's doing 40 miles an hour. You lied to everyone. Those 3 videos really are nothing special. They're nothing important. They're nothing groundbreaking. They change nothing. They are not what people hype them up to be. And that's another often repeated part of how UFO and alien stories work. And that is that people actively and in my opinion, shadily and scummily, they actively don't give you all of the information, and they always overhype and under-deliver, right? Those videos were hyped out the wazoo, and it took a while, but eventually people figured out these are not anything extraordinary. Mick West does an excellent breakdown of all 3 videos and how they're not anything alien, they're not anything extraordinary, and there's likely prosaic, ordinary explanations for those 3 Navy videos. It's just amazing to me that people collected millions of dollars for alien disclosure or whatever based on those 3 videos. And also, we also have to always consider the source. Basically, the source of those videos was a guy who pretended that he ran a Pentagon UFO program in order to personally profit and get book deals and TV show deals. That is another thing that took years to debunk, but eventually we find out that Lou Elizondo never ran a Pentagon UFO program. So not only is he overhyping videos where he signed the release forms that say balloons, drones, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. And those videos were never intended for public distribution. They were supposed to be used for internal use. Oh, 1 second. This is going to be a problem. 1 second. I don't know why, but my phone is going off. I apologize. Hey, friends, it's a live show, and we roll with the punches here. Let me just mute myself for a second and find it. Okay, I apologize. I don't know why, but I had an alarm set here on my phone, and then it was all the way across the room. Gotta make sure that I fix that. And now I've lost my train of thought. Okay, my notes. We're going to go back to my notes. One of the other excellent points that Mr. Dunning makes here is that for decades, people have claimed that UFOs are some form of extraordinary craft. extraordinary craft would be something like alien spacecraft or perhaps super secret government technology that defies the laws of physics. That would be an extraordinary craft. And how many times have we heard that talking point? This thing defied the laws of physics. Or my very favorite is, this thing did 90-degree angle turns. We don't have any technology that could do that. I can go to Walmart for $27 and buy a drone that can make 90-degree turns. So the arguments that people make to sort of support their belief systems are completely and totally flawed and wrong in almost every case. No, these things don't defy the laws of physics. And Eric Weinstein famously said, show me a physicist that says they defy the laws of physics, and not Hal Puthoff, the wackadoo, who also believed in Xenu or Xanadu or whatever, the Scientology guy. You know, he was a high-ranking Scientologist. And he also believed that a guy could bend spoons with mental superpowers who was using magic tricks, children's magic tricks to fool him. And he believes all kinds of wacky stuff. That's the only physicist that you'll ever hear. And I don't even think he's a physicist. I think he has a degree in electrical engineering. Anyway, Eric Weinstein famously said, show me a physicist that says, yeah, there's evidence that they defy the laws of physics. There is no evidence. It's just a talking point. And if you have to basically, invent fake facts in order to, push your narrative, whatever it is, then, you're shady. I'm sorry. So in the description of this video or podcast, if you're listening in audio podcast land, is the link where you too can watch the video for free. And I'm going to include a link to the UFO.movie on the internet, the UFO.movie. And you can watch it on YouTube and Vimeo on demand. You can rent it. Let me share my screen here, and I'll put that in the description of the video as well. Every once in a while here, a ray of hope washes over me that maybe things will start to change. Here's the website for the movie. It's theufo.movie or briandunning.com/UFO/. And here, and isn't it interesting? He did great with this. Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival, LA Sci-Fi and Horror Festival. He really got this film out there, and good for him. And by the way, there's a lot I left out. I left out a lot of the science bits because I wanted to concentrate on the debunking. Physics and relativity, exobiology is discussed, exoplanetary spectral analysis, image analysis, pilot training and air traffic control, defense. We only went through a very small portion of this film. I believe the film is an hour and 33 minutes long. So we've only given you a small taste. And also, I just wanted to mention that Mr. Dunning was supposed to come here for an interview previously, and I don't remember what happened, but I think I had like a family emergency going on, like my child was really sick or something, and I had to cancel the interview. This was some time ago before this movie was released. But I've reached out to him, and we're going to try to get him to come here. He may be a little busy, so I don't know if or when that will happen, but people have asked me to interview him and talk to him about this film. I'd love to do that. And like I said, every once in a while, as cynical as I am, every once in a while, I feel like there's a ray of hope. And this film made me feel like, okay, maybe things can change. And some of the other things from my notes here, let me just mention. Okay, so we made the point about extraordinary craft. Mr. Dunning, it makes an excellent point. All these people claiming this was an extraordinary craft. Do you know in the entire history of UFO land, decades, 70 plus years, whatever it is, no one has ever proven or verifiably shown evidence of an extraordinary craft. They've made claims, but nobody's ever proven it. And I think that would leave you very, very grounded. Also, I did enjoy some of the science parts of the film. Mr. Dunning's background is in education, so he and the scientists that he had involved, he had excellent guests peppered throughout this. A great part of it is just him giving a presentation, but he peppered throughout this entire thing. There's a whole section with Mick West explaining all these UFO, these Navy videos as being nothing spectacular. He had an astrobiologist, an astrophysicist, I think an astronomer, and many other. He was at this huge observatory. And, they talk about, in some very grounded science-based terms, like what are the possibilities that there's other life in the universe? And what are the obstacles for them visiting us? And I particularly enjoyed one portion of that, which was that an often used talking point for UFO true believers and alien people is that they basically say that these aliens are magic. They can just defy the laws of physics, even though it's extremely unlikely or improbable that any other intelligent species spacefaring species especially, would be able to travel here based on the laws of physics. Light speed is only so fast, and that's not fast enough in many cases. And then he also gave some really great explanation of, I think it's called the Fermi paradox, like how, an intelligent civilization only has a window before maybe they go extinct, maybe they blow themselves up after they discover nuclear weapons, maybe there's a pandemic and they all die. And Mr. Dunning does an excellent job at explaining that in order for two independent, intelligent species anywhere in the cosmos to visit each other or communicate, there's a problem of distance. So they need to be fairly close together star systems, but also there's the problem of time. We are just a tiny, tiny blip in the long span of the universe, right? How old is the universe? How long have we been here? So he gives a great explanation of the likelihood that two separate intelligent species of humans or humanoids or whatever, alien and humanoid, whatever, he gives a great explanation and uses some great analogies like blinking Christmas lights on a tree. They both have to be blinking at exactly the same time. They have to be close enough together. They have to also be alive and technologically advanced at the same time. So there's a lot of obstacles for us being able to visit with another intelligent species in the universe or to have them visit us. There's an incredible amount of obstacles. Now, I'm still hopeful that this will happen someday. I'm incredibly hopeful that we're going to discover life in my lifetime in the universe. Maybe, I don't know if I'd be satisfied with just life. If they find some microbes on Mars, that's not going to excite me very much. But if they discover intelligent life, and he also gives some excellent, he had experts on this. And it's kind of was inspiring to me to hear some of these scientists, because all three of them that he had, I think it was, again, an astrobiologist, an astronomer, and somebody else, all three of them believe that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, or definitely at least life elsewhere in the universe. And they give like the probability of that and why that is possible, citing specific examples for why it's more than likely that there is some form of life on another planet. And also, I mentioned previously that excellent information, 5,000. They've already discovered 5,000 exoplanets. And actually, I'm going to Google it right now, because he said during the show, during the video, during the documentary, he said there may be many more by the time you see this video. I'm just going to Google how many exoplanets are there, or how many exoplanets have been discovered. He gave a figure of 5,000. Okay, so it says to date, more than 5,000 exoplanets have been discovered. So he wasn't far off. I'm sure there's going to be more. So it's fine that he put that line in by the time you watch that. People might watch his film 5 years from now, and we'll be at 10,000 exoplanets discovered. These, like the Kepler and some of these other telescopes, the space-based telescopes, and by the way, more are going to be launched in the coming years, are going to really increase our understanding. He also includes an excellent explanation for how they're going to be able to tell if planets are likely to contain life, and how they're going to be able to determine that with coming technology. We're this close to be able to look at an exoplanet and be able to know for sure if there's a high likelihood that it contains organic life. So all in all, I would say this is an excellent film. I began the broadcast saying that this is the best, or I almost said, this is the best UFO documentary I've seen in a decade. But again, opinions will vary. Believers are not going to like this. It blows Ariel School out of the water. It blows Rendlesham Forest out of the water. It blows the Maelstrom incident out of the water. And selfishly, I wish that he would have done more cases, right? Because he has an excellent presentation, and really, it's incredibly difficult for anybody, even if you really want to believe those stories, to watch each of his presentations on why these stories are likely garbage and walk away unconvinced. I mean, people want to live in their delusional fantasy world. Some people will not hear, they just put the blinders on, no, I can't hear you, I feel like that a lot of times. People are like that with me. Like, they just don't want to hear it. I know people that I still get nasty emails every day about Bob Lazar videos I made 3 years ago. People yelling at me in all caps and, telling me what an asshole I am because Bob Lazar is the real deal. No, he's a fake scientist, convicted pimp liar that never stepped foot on Area 51. And those are the facts. If you don't like it, you don't like it, right? All right, so we're going to take some comments and questions from the live chat before we bounce on out of here. Wise Monkey is here. Always happy to see Wise Monkey. Says, intelligence is out there, but the chances of interaction are astronomically tiny due to light speed, distances, volume, and time. Yeah, but I'm not saying Mr. Dunning is wrong, but maybe some of the people that I talked to, including Stanton Friedman, were a little too believer brained, because I'm sure I still have it on tape. I taped the calls, but Stanton Friedman told me, he said it even during my public interview, that and he's a nuclear physicist, and he said he did all the math, and I trust his math is better than mine, being a nuclear physicist. But anyway, Stanton Friedman once told me that we could get us as Earthlings right now with currently available technology, but you'd have to do some development. He was talking about nuclear rockets, nuclear-powered rockets, could get to like half the speed of light or 3/4 or whatever. I don't know. He worked it out. And he told me that us as humans right now could get to the closest star system in 6 months of pilot time. But then it gets very complicated and confusing because of general relativity. The faster you go, the slower time moves. So while the pilot would experience 6 months of linear time, 30 years might go by on Earth somehow. It's very confusing. And this problem of space and time being directly related and speed and time being direct, it's mind-bending. It kind of gives me a headache to think about it. But Stanton Friedman told me that we could get to the nearest star system in 6 months of pilot time. But I think there's an awful lot of problems that he doesn't really, factor into his estimates, because, if you're going that fast, like a meteorite or a speck of dust could blow up your ship. And like, that's a problem you have to overcome. You can't just you can't just go near the speed of light with a nuclear rocket. Maybe you can. I'm not a physicist. I don't know. But Stan was adamant with me that no, you could get to the nearest star system in 6 months of pilot time with a nuclear-powered rocket. Now, I wish I would have, really asked him to explain this to me like a monkey can understand it, because he was an extremely smart guy, and I didn't really dig in on this point with him. I just trusted that he's a nuclear physicist. And I even asked him, I'm like, did you do some equations or math? And he's like, oh yeah, I could send you the math. It's true. You could get to the nearest star system in 6 months of pilot time. And he did indeed work on nuclear projects and nuclear rockets specifically. That was a large part of his career. So I kind of believe him. And he was very bitter that the United States abandoned research into nuclear powered rockets, because he believed that we could have already been out there in the nearby star systems, even if we just used them to send, drones and send back information or bring back samples from nearby exoplanets around nearby star systems. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark says I'm not reading his comments. I've done a relatively fair analysis of the movie from my perspective. Okay, well, what's your perspective? What did I get wrong, right? What did I get wrong? Wise Monkey says, correct, Steve. We may discover life in our lifetime. Intelligent life is not happening while we are around. Could be. Arlene Adkins-Zell is here. Oh, and you know what? One second here. Let me catch up. Arlene Atkins tells, there's so much that we don't know. Things are being discovered and science facts are being adjusted all the time. It is entirely possible that other life could travel here. I keep an open mind. Yeah, I think that's best to do. Randy is here and says, with Rendlesham, why do the skeptics always go for a lighthouse at Southward when it's over 20 miles to the north of the UFO sighting? Well, Randy, do you know how far away you can see a lighthouse beam, especially on a foggy night? A lot more than 20 miles. I don't know. I spent a lot of time on boats in the ocean. My father was a Navy man, and he made us do things on the ocean. I've seen lighthouses. I could see buoys for probably 10 miles. And that's just a blinking light floating in the middle of a channel or something. So if I could see that for 10 or 20 miles, I'm pretty sure you could see a lighthouse for 10 or 20 miles. But fair point. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not sure I believe Mr. Dunning's hoodie. Who says another dimension isn't more technical than our rockets? Different rules would apply. Moody Mongol is here and says nuclear power, not rockets, but in a contained generator could open up some interesting tech stuff. I'm sure things have happened on that. Yeah, it could be. Incorruptus is here and says, when it is Elon's rockets to Mars, we could need to recon with recharge time as well, around every 1,500 miles. Well, he's using conventional rockets, so I don't think that's the case. But, he's using conventional rockets, but with much more technologically advanced guidance and steering systems and reusability. Some people think that he should be developing other technology other than rockets, but I think if you've got something that works and you can just refine it and make it better, maybe you should use it. Matt S. is here. Steve, although I love the way you dismantle these loose screws with rage, do it with more humor. Me likes funny. Okay, I'll try to be funnier. Sorry. Listen. Tune in every night. Some nights the shows are more funny. Some nights they're a little more serious and not so funny. Oh no, Spooky. Is this like the 10-foot tall aliens that people were seeing when all those cops were around? Spooky with a kind and generous £2 super chat. The only one of the night, by the way. But I think people are a little shy of the super chats when they know I'm doing like a presentation. They think I'm going to miss it. We read every single super chat. So Spooky with the first super chat of the night. No honey, no money tonight. But that's okay. Breaking news. 8-foot shadow beings loose in PA. Was that in PA? The thing with the cops, that's been debunked. It was a bunch of kids with sticks fighting and lighting fireworks and refusing to leave. And they got a report. Apparently, the police got a report of an active shooter. So they called all available cops to come to the same area. Steve Long is here and says, it's the Orfordness Lighthouse, which was a range of 25 miles, by the way. And the Orford Lighthouse is 6 miles away from Rendlesham. There you go. There you go. So it could have been both of them, right? Deb from Sac is here. See that? I got some honey. I got some money from my honey, Deb from Sac. Thank you for being a member. With kind of generous $5 super chat says Stephen has the best humor and laugh. Well, I'm glad that somebody enjoys it. My wife never wants to hear a joke, Deb from Sac. Never. I think she hates my jokes, and she doesn't appreciate my humor. Oh, Spooky says I was joking. Okay, all right. I thought there was another case popping off. Okay, thank you, Ardent Paranormal. I got your message. When I put off my glasses, everything becomes Leyland as well? Layin as well? I don't know. Mark says, yes, from the skeptic's perspective, you did a fair analysis, even from a believer's perspective. I think that it's pretty hard to argue with a power failure and a 10 to 40 second shutdown and a newspaper article, especially, listen, the Maelstrom, I don't think anybody can argue with that case is likely fake, and the embellished stories of a true believer in the form of Robert Sala. Seems like a nice guy. Maybe he truly believes what he's been selling people, but 3 books in, and he hasn't proven anything. He's been working UFO conferences for decades, right? Eric Stitt says Stephen is funny. Fight me, Eric. Didn't you used to do graphics, or am I confusing you with somebody else? And thank you for being a member. I know there was an Eric that did excellent graphics that I used some of that person's graphics. Is that you, Eric Stitt, or am I confusing you with another Eric? And if so, I apologize. Steve Long said, no, there's only one lighthouse that skeptics point to. Orfordness. Is that the one that's 6 miles away, or that one that's 20 miles away and has a 25-mile range? Either one could have been the source of those mysterious lights through the forest. And by the way, Steve Long, I have seen some weird shit in a forest at night, especially a foggy forest. And it's England, so it's always foggy. I really, truly believe that what they saw, especially look at that. Look what Brian Dunning did. He put a beep every time they saw the lights. He put a beep, and it was in exactly 5-second intervals. By the way, that's one other criticism. He should have put a counter up. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is again. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is right there. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think he should have put a counter up, but that's a little stupid thing. Overall, I think it was a great effort, and I'm excited too, because I'd like to get into making documentaries, but I felt like I would be the only one in that genre. It's nice to know that there are some scientific, skeptically minded people that are giving people the real truth. And by the way, I want to say again, please support this man's efforts. Go rent it on Vimeo. I thought you could buy it on Vimeo. I think you can only rent it. I don't know. Or I believe that he takes PayPal donations, or I don't know, super chats. I'm going to go and give him some money because I enjoyed this video. And even when somebody puts a video out for free that I really enjoy, as an artist myself, I like to support them so they make more art. So I'm going to throw him a couple bucks. I encourage you to as well. So Steve Long, which one is the lighthouse that skeptics point to? Is it the one that's 6 miles away or the one that's 20? Megger Briar Patch opinions aren't source material, and I'm not worshiping at this altar. Wants to explain everything away, and it's suspicious. I'm not sure what that reference to. The lighthouse beaming through distant trees or other terrain could create some interesting flashing lights, no doubt. Yeah, and I'm aware of that, Chris Damaris, but it doesn't discount his work being true and accurate and scientifically valid. Somebody is talking about Mr. Dunning having some problems in his past. I believe all men deserve a road to redemption. Well, most of them anyway. Steve Long, Rendlesham is a tended forest, trees planted in straight rows. Lighthouse lights shining through them are well known to be confusing. Yes, I agree. And by the way, I just want to mention on that note that true believers who don't like being fed real science and real facts and the truth behind these scammy stories will use anything they can to discredit a skeptic. We've seen it here. Somebody was a guest on my show and they got arrested for stealing some computers, and that was like 20 plus years ago. Oh, nothing he says is credible because he made a mistake 20 plus years ago. I think everybody has to be taken, every case, I suppose, has to be taken on their own, on the merits of the case, I didn't, to be honest, I haven't really looked very deeply into that specific case. I read a couple of articles and I just kind of decided, okay, maybe the guy made a mistake, but it certainly doesn't mean that his work is invalid or not correct. His work is very, very correct. It's factual. He's using real science and real standards of evidence. But I have seen true believers attacking him viciously for that, some case from his past. Mega Briar Patch says his opinions are based on his logical interpretation of the evidence. Deb from Sac says, marry me, Stephen. Well, I'm not really sure if my wife would be okay with that. I'd probably be okay with it, but I think she might object, right? We used to watch that show, Sister Wives, though. Maybe we can get it past her. Like, hey, you know what? She did joke one time, Deb from Sac. She's told me one time, we were talking about this because something about Sister Wives came on or something, or somebody was talking about polygamy. And she said she'd be okay with me getting another wife, but as long as that other wife was like completely and totally addicted to cleaning and cooking and running errands and doing all the things that she doesn't enjoy doing. So maybe you should work on that. William Runner says, I went to school with a guy from Ipswich. Yeah. Okay, and Steve Long is clarifying for me because they sound similar, these two lighthouses. Orphanedness, 6 miles away, has a 25-mile range. Then that definitely could be what occurred. If it has a 25-mile range and it was a foggy night, right? Because you know how fog has a tendency to like do strange things to light, right? Yeah. Take some more comments and questions. Mark D. Truthseekers says, I do struggle with the nuclear silo being dependent on local power grids, though. Well, it's not. They also have diesel power generators and battery backup systems. So even if there was a long-term power failure, the missiles would likely still work. They're not gonna not have a backup system for weapon systems that important, right? What if the Russians all started launching, or the Chinese or whoever, an adversary, an enemy of ours, started launching nuclear missiles at us, and there was a power failure where our missiles were being stored? We're just going to wait it out? Like, oh, we'd like to counter launch, but we can't. No, they've got backup systems for these things. Steve, they'd seen lighthouse loads, though, or it'd be UFOs every night. Well, a lot could depend on the atmospheric conditions and all that kind of stuff. Let's send in a lighthouse blink to Linda and tell her it's aliens. She would totally believe that. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how far behind I am in the live chat. I apologize. MK Ultra's here. Have you heard of the Baudet tape? It's allegedly clear video of a Lake Champlain monster that's been released, but a few frames and a couple of seconds of video. No, email it to me at truthseekershow@gmail.com. I would appreciate it. Co-N is here and says, it's in reference to having to answer for everything, and it's laughable. By the way, I don't support UFO cons either. Too much use of truth being thrown around. Okay, Cohen. John P. Adventures is here. Stephen, it's called The Cleaning Lady. Brother, I have one 5 hours a week, and it's a blessing. I had one for a short time. I used to have this, I think she was a Puerto Rican woman that lived in my neighborhood in Philadelphia. This is before I even met my wife. And I met her at the local laundromat, and I told her how much I hated doing laundry and cleaning and cooking. And she was like, I could do that for you. And I'm like, really? Well, how's that work? And she goes, I'll come over once a week and clean and do your laundry. And I said, what do you want? And I think she wanted $50. It was the best $50 I ever spent because, being a bachelor, living by yourself, your house is filthy. So this girl would come over, and I mean, she would clean. She had that Solvesa, that purple stuff oh man, my house smelled nice, looked nice. She rearranged some furniture and stuff, did my laundry, but then she moved back to Puerto Rico, and I cried. I was so upset. I couldn't really afford it at the time either. I was really struggling. So scraping up the $50 for her wasn't easy. But to me, it was worth it because I could have girls over and not worry that the house was messy or dirty or stunk or the bathroom was dirty or whatever. Oh, thank you. I apologize. Eric Stitt, third time's the charm. I was Jimmy Church's artist. Well, why don't you come work for me? Because I'm a better show host. Come on. And you are the person that I thought you were. So I used that. Listen, you got to do me a favor. You did this piece called Lazar, and I used it for a thumbnail once, but I'm working on this Bob Lazar. It's going to be a free documentary, and I would really like to use that for the cover, but all I've been able to find is like a really low res version of that Lazar thing. If you could email me that at truthseekershow@gmail.com, I'll even pay you some by PayPal if you let me use that, if you have it in high quality. Yeah, Eric's art is incredible, but didn't you stop doing art for a while or something? I think. Arlene, I could possibly handle two. My wife would probably appreciate it from time to time. Yeah, give your wife a break in the sack too, right? And then, no, I could never handle more than one wives. Let's just get that straight. Yeah, and I apologize, Eric, that I'll never forget. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That Lazar artwork is some of my very favorite. I want a high quality image of that because I want to use that for this free documentary project, and I would like to blow it up into a poster here for my office because we're going to do Lazar the rest of the story. I'll add the other text or whatever. Just send me what you had, and we'll figure it out. We'll work on it in the highest quality possible, please. And this Bob Lazar documentary basically is giving all of the information that George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell won't tell people. And it's going to blow the whole story to shit. And there's a new Bob Lazar documentary coming out this year. So I want to hurry up and get mine ready. And as soon as that Lazar documentary, the new one, drops, I'm going to drop mine. And it's going to be free on YouTube. It will be, I guess, my second free documentary that I will have produced. And the next one I want some goddamn money for. But I think it's good practice to make films and not expect much. Just do it for the experience of doing it. You know, by the time I'm ready to demand money for a film project, I will be worth it. I think, having produced a few free ones, right? I think I made a whole $27 on the first documentary that I put on YouTube for free. It's called "Is This the Face of Bigfoot?" You can check it out here on our channel. Corbell bought a huge poster of the Lazar art. Chump. Yes, not another Lazar documentary. Please, God, no. Yeah, but mine is going to tell everybody the truth about Bob Lazar and not leave all the dirt out and not lie to everybody, right? The Lazar art was initially done for Jeremy Corbell for his DVD cover, but he didn't. Oh my God, you got to give it to me. You got to let me use it, please. That is an act of of karma. That will be perfect. Remember that cover art you didn't use? Well, I did. Yeah. So really, Eric's did. I'm calling it Lazar, the rest of the story, because everybody that sells the Bob Lazar story leaves out all the goddamn dirt. They don't tell you that his wife was a convicted murderer and hung out with the Hells Angels, and he was bankrupt and he never stepped foot on Area 51, and about the whorehouse and all that stuff. I'm going to include all the information. It's the rest of the story, the part of the story that all the UFO profiteering scumbag scammers don't give you about Bob Lazar. Wow, that's awesome. Like I said, it's yours. I have a picture of Lazar and Knapp sitting in front of my poster. I'll send that pic too. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's truthseekershow@gmail.com. I'm so glad that it just clicked to me. I'm like, oh, that's Eric Stitt, the incredible artist. And wait a minute. It's a synchronicity, right? All these crystal hippie bitches are right. I was just thinking, no, I'm not kidding you, like maybe a week or two ago, not that recently, but I think a week or two ago, I didn't even start editing it yet, Eric, but I have a folder where I'm putting pieces in, things that I have to do and keeping notes all in the one folder. And a week or two ago, I went, man, I got to find that guy that did that Lazar poster that I used in the thumbnail, because I tried to get that graphic from one of my thumbnails, but it's really shit quality. And I remember that yours looked incredible and it was probably real high definition. And of course, I'd like to have it in the greatest quality. I was just thinking that a week or two ago. Then I see your name and I go, oh, is that the guy that did the Lazar thing? I got to find out. I'm glad to see you here. Yeah, it's truthseekershow@gmail.com, or Stephen Cambion. You can DM me at Stephen Cambion on Twitter, or Truthseeker Show at Instagram, or you can send it to me on Facebook. It's Stephen Cambion, but the best thing is probably truthseekershow@gmail.com. That's the best email for me. And I appreciate it so much. I'll credit you and whatever else I could do. Let me buy some of your other artwork or do something for you. I'd appreciate it. That is it's so perfect to use that as the cover to mine because of what you said about Jeremy. Oh, Co-N says, the New Age grift is way bigger than the UFO one, and the stuff here gets super redundant. Stop beating the dead horse and cover something much more socially detrimental. You know what? I cover what I like to cover, and I've covered a lot of New Age scams, all the medbed scam shows that we've done, fake psychics. That's all New Age stuff. I don't know why you're complaining, right? And by the way, Co-N, you can buy a webcam and a microphone for about $20 and start your own show. Good luck, buddy. Do a better job than me. And it's not that I can't take criticism, but sometimes people criticize me and I don't think it's justified. Like, I have covered New Age scams, Sarah R. Adams, Randy Kramer's medbed scam, somebody else's medbed scam, fake psychics, fake mediums, and more. Like, I'm sorry if you don't think I'm doing a good enough job, but I would invite you to, do better than me. Show me how to do it better. I'm always here lurking. Have you heard of Miami Mall? Looks like a sham. Yeah, that's what I thought Spooky was talking about, the Miami Mall story. It's a complete, totally fake story, went viral. There's no 10-foot tall monsters, right? Incorruptus says, Lazar nearly thought everyone forgot his story, and the poor thing needs to hear this one all his life. Yeah, apparently. Yes, Steve Long, Co-N, feel free to start your. Listen, though, I don't want to be too harsh, Steve Long, because maybe it's just that some people lack tact. Do you know what I mean, Steve Long? Like, some people just say things and it sounds rude when they say it. They don't mean to be rude, and if that's the case, I apologize, Co-N. and no worries. It sounded really kind of rude, right? Okay. All right, Cohen. No worries. He says, I'm aware and Stephen should cover it more. I'm not saying it hasn't been addressed, only that it could be deeper covered. Yeah. And I also get half the views, Cohen. We get half the views, which translates into half the finances when we cover those topics. We get half the views, half the super chats, half of, So my audience wants more UFO con artists and grifters by and large, and UFO scams more than the New Age scams. We try to do what people want to do. I do have a huge story I have a story, Cohen, that I've been developing slowly. It's probably going to take me another couple months, but it is the biggest New Age scam I have ever covered in the history of my show. It's the biggest New Age scam I've ever seen in my entire life. But it requires, here's another problem, Cohen. Number one, those kind of stories take a great deal of time and energy and dedication. Like, for example, let's just use this as an example. This big New Age scam story I'm working on, I've been working on for months. Now, not every day, but maybe every week I'll do an hour or two on that story because it's a slow, steady slog to get all of the things done and investigate everything and call people, request interviews. I'm going places in person for this story. There's a lot to do. And that story, the New Age scam story, that's going to take me months more of work to complete, will get half the views that Tonight Show got. Tonight Show, I watched a 90-minute video twice, once just watching it, once making notes, so that I can speak intelligently and give a good review and discussion about it. And this one tonight that only took a few hours to prepare will get twice the views. So do you see the problem with covering New Age stuff, and especially New Age scams? And by the way, just so you're aware, Cohen, when you're covering probable or possible people that are committing crimes, you have to be incredibly thorough and incredibly careful and dot every I and cross every T, because people like to throw around lawsuits if you're not correct about something. New Age scams, all scams, I have to be incredibly careful that I, number one, am fair, and number two, have the goods. Like if I'm going to say this is a scam, I have to be sure, and I have to show a mountain of evidence that no one can argue with when I say this is a New Age scam. So there's liability issues there as well. We do our best to do all that stuff, but it's discouraging to me. If I had my way, I would do nothing but those investigative journalism pieces where I really dig into a story and investigate a situation or a scam, but they take forever. And then I get half the views sometimes. This murder in UFO land, that's a perfect example. I batted that story back and forth for 3 months. I did a whole bunch of different interviews and I investigated things and I'm reading things, researching things. It didn't do very well. I got the same views as I would if I just press go live and ran it about scammers in the UFO community for 2 hours with no preparation. It's discouraging. It's really discouraging. Jason Parker says Jimmy Church is losing parishioners. His numbers are in the shitter. Do you see his numbers when he doesn't have a big scammer guest? Unfortunately, Stephen is about the only show scrutinizing and covering the UFO topic with skepticism. Kudos for continuing your efforts year after year. Well, to be honest with you, Steve Long, this may be the last year. I don't want to get melodramatic here, but I've put 3 years so far into this, and it just kind of bothers me when I see people just selling outright bullshit and scams and lies, making 10 or 100 times the money that we make here. And it's not that I'm not grateful. We're grateful for the level of support that we have. But see, like Cohen, people demand my time. And I'm not making taco. I could work at Taco Bell for the time that I invest in this show every month and make the same money. But again, for me, it's not about money here, but I decided before the new year rolled over, Steve Long, that I would give this one more year. And I will give my very best effort in this year. But if things don't start turning around, and I mean turning around in many different ways, views wise, financially, whatever, I got to go do something else with my time. I can go do a cabin channel. I have a friend that gets hundreds of thousands of views, and all he does is go camping and film it, Steve Long. This UFO thing is a very tiny subculture, and especially us, because we're a subculture within a subculture. We're in a subculture, UFOs and aliens and conspiracy land, but we're the skeptical culture within that tiny subculture. So it's just not a huge market if you're not going to sell bullshit. Or, I don't know what to do to get those numbers pumped up other than start selling bullshit, which I'm not really willing to do. Mark D. Truthseekers says, so just to be clear, I'll be here at least until next December 31st. But after that, I can't promise, because there's other things I would like to do with my life. I have other goals and other things I'd like to accomplish. And, we've done a valiant effort here, and we never sold out. And by the way, that's another issue. And reason why I'm only committing to one more year. I'm sure I can hold out and not sell out and become a scumbag for one more year. But after that, I don't know. I might freak out and say, I can't do this shit anymore. Right? and become I'll become third phase of loon. That's what I'll do. I'll just start making fake UFO videos in my garage with a green screen and shit, and just cash out, and I don't really want to do that. Our show has a good history and legacy here. Spooky says keep going for another 4 years. I'm the president of the anti-UFO grift squad, I guess. Steve Long says, I could certainly understand moving on, Stephen. Many good researchers have. The return is far less than the energy expended. Meanwhile, evidence-less grifters get millions of views. Yeah, and it bothers you after a while. I try not to let it, because I say to myself, Steve Long, I'm not in the same category as them. I didn't sell out. I didn't sell my soul. I didn't just throw my ethics and morality in the goddamn trash can and say anything for $1. All those people did. They just did, and that's just the way it is. Deb from Sac says, Jason Parker, you have no idea, especially his OG faders. Yeah, his number's shit. I have a friend who is a UFO fanatic. I try to put him into your channel, but he is not opening to listen. He wants to live in his make-believe world. Well, thank you, Andrea, for at least trying, and I'm sorry to hear that. Some people aren't ready. Some people, do you know how many times somebody will tell me how wrong I am and like send me a nasty message? And then maybe a year later, year and a half, some future point in time, they send me a message apologizing and tell me that I was right, because suddenly they got out of the fantasy land. But thank you for trying. I watched Stephen 2.5 years. I've seen the discouragement and the satisfaction. Yeah, some things, little successes will keep you going. And it's what every successful person says. You got to be incredibly passionate about what you're doing, because if you're not going to make it. We've been here for 3 years. Did you know I did more than a year before we were even monetized? I think we did a year and a half for free. I just every night doing a show for free for a year and a half, even just to get to them. I mean, I think we took PayPal and buy me a coffee, but it was like, I think it was like $80 a month, or it didn't even cover the expenses for the software that we use and everything. But Steve, this is the year we get disclosure. Yeah, that's the other reason this might be my last year. Because then we're going to get disclosure, and I'm going to look like I was wrong about everything, and I don't want that to happen, right? William Runner says, Andrea, there are many like that. It's a religion, ufology. Wise Monkey, what about the buried spaceship you DM'd me about? If you tell them that without disclosing the source, obviously, millions of clicks. Yeah, I love Linda. When is she rattling about pyramids? She is so knowledgeable. Our angelic lady, so fragile and sweet with cats. She's a grifter. She's a grifter. Troll. You could always try pimping like Bob Lazar. I don't think my wife would love me running a whorehouse or let me run a whorehouse. I don't know. I can ask her. Like, imagine that conversation. Like, hey, honey, I'm going to start a new business and I just want to run it by you. I'm going to open a whorehouse. Like, I don't think I could get that past my wife, right? Rezo Factor says, comb back your hair and show more of your forehead. Guaranteed to work. The UFO community, says Arlen Eckenzel, is a tough community to be a part of. People get really nasty when you criticize their castle of lies. William Runner says, I wish there were money in telling the facts, Stephen. It's sad that BS is what makes the money. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Scallywag says, there's a sucker born every minute. You can't save them all. Yeah. William Runner, kind and generous $20 super chat, says, praise the cash. Yeah, we want to thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. I'm sorry, I just totally forgot to play bumpers earlier for you super chatters. So here's what I'm going to do. We'll give you, William Runner, get a praise the cash.
Yes, praise the cash, praise the cash.
All right, and then and then let me just thank our other super chatters tonight. Spooky with a kind and generous £2, Deb from Zach with a kind and generous $5 and being a member, and Eric Stitt, thank you for being a member and a kind and generous $5. And I apologize if I've asked you before. There's so many names, Mr. Stitt, that come through the live chat, and some of them get mixed up in my brain. So I sincerely apologize. And of course, William Runner with a kind and generous $20 super chat. So we thank you all for your kindness, generosity, and support. We want to take a moment to thank you Patreon supporters and you kind and generous YouTube channel members as well.
You're watching Truthseekers. Praise the cash, praise the cash.
I have some new bumpers of him recorded. You'd be amazed at how big he's gotten. Our little cash clown is turning into a big cash clown. And he and I have an ongoing argument because I was going to buy a marmoset monkey. For those unaware, that's a little tiny monkey. Some people actually call it a pocket monkey because you could keep it in your pocket. That's how small they are. And anyway, I was really and truly going to get a marmoset. I think it's called a marmoset monkey. I could be wrong with the name. Anyway, I was going to buy a little monkey, and my wife didn't think this was a good idea. She doesn't want any more animals because she claims that she's going to end up having to take care of him. So I've been teasing my son for months now. Every day I pick him up from school and I go, do you want to go to the pet store and get the pocket monkey? And he ratted me out to his mother that I was going to buy a monkey and got me in a lot of trouble because she thought, we had already talked about it, but she thought I was seriously going to go do it against her wishes, right? So, yeah. So now I got to bust the cash clown's balls about being a rat for ratting me out about the pocket monkey. And, do I still have it in my pocket? I don't know. Oh, no, I lost it. Anyway, my son found this little monkey and he gave it to me. He said, I'm sorry you can't have a real monkey, Dad, but this is good enough and it won't make mommy upset. So he gave me a little monkey toy that you could keep in your pocket. I don't know. Patty Wilhelm says it's an alien, not a monkey. That's what I was going to try. We were going to narrow him down or shave him down, and I was going to say it was a little monkey, right? Get the Griff squad going, right? Art and Paranormal, I might have one of them too. And I got it from. It's a long story. I got one Valentine's Day, and you can imagine why. My wife was angry with me. But let's not talk about that. John P. Adventures, I don't know what the hell you're typing up a storm over there. I don't know what that is. Scallywag says, is that a monkey in your pocket, or are you just pleased to see me? I don't know. Do you think Bob Lazar made the rocket car at the whorehouse? I don't know, but you just gave me a good idea for a skit. I got to find a whorehouse and a car with a rocket engine in it. I agree. Scallywag says, I will upstage Linda's pussies if I get a monkey. And let's not mention Linda Moulton Howe and that word in the same sentence anymore because it kind of makes me gag. organ grinder monkey. They will throw feces at. That's what my wife says, and that's what my wife told my son. She poisoned my son. He's like, I don't think you should get a monkey. Mommy says they throw poop at you. And I'm like, they don't all throw poop at you. And he's like, Mommy said they throw poop at you. They all do it. And I'm like, no, they don't all throw poop at you. Just the nasty ones. We're going to get a good monkey, right? Welch is here with some kind words saying, I like your show, Stephen. Well, I like you being here for it. So we want to thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. And kind words. I wonder if Linda shaves. Oh, God damn it. Now I'm going to have that image in my head. My wife's not always around. What do you want me to say, Mark? All right. We're getting off on a really bad tangent here. So I think this is a good jumping off point. Now, I will be staying home this weekend from the cabin. This is a rare Friday night show. We don't usually do this here. And I will be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Haven't decided what show I'm running yet. So let me know in the comments or in the live chat. Do you want to see a panel show tomorrow? Do you want to see a presentation show? Do you want to see an interview? I think we said we were going to bring Steve Long here, and I have somebody trying to help me book some guests. We'll see if we can't scrape up a guest or, sober one up enough to get him here, right? Anyway, we want to thank our first of all, we want to thank Mr. Dunning for putting out this excellent film and I didn't ask him, but for letting us review it. Better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, I always think. We want to thank you kind and generous benefactors, you Patreon supporters, you YouTube channel members, you super chatters, you PayPal pledgers, and all of you. There's people on Twitch. I don't know if you know this, but if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can support my show to the tune of, I think, $5. And you can do that every month, and it's included in your Prime membership. So you could throw a few bucks in our hat that will cost you nothing. I love the fact that we're able to. We want to thank Initials AV. I'm not sure they want me to use their real name, so we will just use the initials AV with a kind and generous $10 PayPal pledge, who says, thank you for your consistent content and your hard work. No, thank you, AV, for your kindness, generosity, and support. And by the way, the next time if you do that again, send me your chat room user ID so that I can thank you more properly. You added a note and said, thank you for your consistent content and your hard work. And you sent that today, January 5th, but you didn't include a chat room user ID. So next time, do so I'll know I can connect the dots and thank you properly. And we're going to thank Maria for kind of generous $20 PayPal pledge. And the message is simply, keep it up. Great shows lately. Thank you, Maria, for your kindness, generosity, and support. It is much, much appreciated. And so we thank all of you for your kindness, generosity, and support. I'll be back tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you'll be here with us. No place I would rather be. And tonight, to this weekend, because of an impending huge storm, I'm not going to the cabin because there's a really high likelihood I could get stuck there for a week while they clear the roads. Takes longer. Everything takes longer at the cabin. And I'm way back in the woods, so it takes them a while to dig everybody out. I don't want to get stuck and risk getting stuck there. So staying home this weekend. I'll be back tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you'll be here with us. So that's all I got for you, friends. Until next time, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.